Story 1. DM kills me off with one-shot spell to prove I don't know how to play properly. I'm not exactly an experienced D&D player, but I am very into tactics games. I've got a new job and they invited me to a during work D&D group. I've not really cared about D&D, but getting paid to play sounds great. Fast forward a year and a half, and at an hour a week, we are almost to the end of the first dungeon, soon to find the dwarf's stashed treasure. I had earned the nickname Leroy Jenkins for recklessly charging into rooms. I kept doing this because I didn't and still don't understand what is reckless about walking into a room after doing a listen check, spot check, trap check into the area by multiple characters with high stats in each. The other players ranged from thinking it was funny to one player messaging me after games thanking me for moving the game forward. The person who didn't appreciate was the DM. He told me outside of the game how reckless I was and that I should let the tanks go first, at least. I was confused by this until a couple of new players joined as tanks. I had been speccing into a tank druid. I brushed this comment off since I was tanking well and he didn't like that. Finally, we got into an intense fight at the bottom of the dungeon against some very powerful drow. Ironically, this fight started by us seeing them from far away, and not from me charging into the room. I rolled high on initiative, and being a melee fighter, moved forward to engage. While I sped forward outside of combat, in combat I am much more careful and split up my movement going forward instead of just charging in with my full movement to get the group of drow mages. I stopped about 10 feet away of my closest party member, still about 30 feet away from the enemies. Turns out there was a giant summon hiding behind a wall that got an opportunity attack on me and several more enemies jumped out. This was him proving my recklessness. Unfortunately for him, I really was a tank and continued to heal through the damage throughout the battle. Despite being the primary target of attacks, even after other party members stepped out in front of me, unfortunately for me, the DM had an ace up his sleeve. All the enemy mages had a spell unique to 3.5e called Destruction. You get a fortitude save against it. If you pass, you get 10d6 damage. Our party averaged 100 health each, with me about 110. If you fail the save, you are destroyed completely, not even ashes left. I was morphed into a troll to buff my fortitude, but even with that, the roll gave me a 20% chance of failing. I passed the save and took the damage for the first 3 times it was cast on me, and even healed back to about 80 health. It didn't pass the 4th time. The DM private messaged me that there was a way to resurrect me if the group paid a large amount of gold and travelled for what would be about 3 or 4 sessions. And they might do it if I begged them. Then in-game told them that they knew they were very close to finding the treasure as the fight finished. The player that likes when I move the game forward offered to pay for my resurrection, but no one else seemed to really care that I died. I'm planning on leaving the group. I don't care enough to go back and hear the DM talk about how he taught me a lesson about charging in while the rest of the group begrudgingly travels for several sessions to bring me back. The problem is, the DM will still probably have it out for me. I had a good laugh about it with my friend, who was an avid D&D player, and he told me to post the story here. Man, oh man, that is so sad. And for it to work. This sounds like a DM who perhaps identified this person as a problem player when they were just trying to play the game that was most fun for them. I don't think there's anything wrong with them running in per se, but maybe the DM had other plans that he wanted to reveal. That being said, if the player was having fun, wasn't really causing problems for the party, I don't see why this lesson, quote unquote, had to be taught. I mean, hopefully he finds a group that allows him to play his tank druid and tank all of the damage. Story 2. DM tried to implement BDSM into a high school D&D game. Understands it about as well as a 50 Shades fan. Oh boy, can't wait for this one. Content warning. Fictional depictions of tempted SA, general creepiness. Then again, considering where this is posted, that should come at no surprise. Full disclosure, I'm into BDSM. Specifically, I'm a dom. Great. A female player I hadn't met yet, who I will call Wizard for fairly obvious reasons, is apparently a sub. We did not know this about one another, but the DM was a mutual friend of ours, was aware of the fact about both of us. This will come up later. Also, we use a lot of homebrew content. One noteworthy piece of homebrew was coup de grace rules, similar to those of 3.5e, but with a constitution save. Another was that if your character dies, you're kicked from the campaign, and this will come up too. The DM and I had been friends in high school for a while. It was back in the summer of 2017 and I was 16 years old. I was of the opinion that the summer was going to be a drag because I didn't have much to do, so DM suggested I join the party. I agreed because I didn't want to get super bored. If you read and wonder why there's so much edgy stuff, that was usually how we enjoyed ourselves. We were all teenagers and dark shit was fun. We had weekly sessions, but only 3 ever happened. All of these sessions were in person. When I entered the party, the comps were this. Me, Samurai Fighter, GWM, Bonkers Damage, former Town Guard. Wizard, 15-year-old female player. Abjuration Wizard, kinda acted like a tank. Rogue, 14-year-old male player. Swashbuckler Rogue, played sneaking by shouting, "You don't see me," at enemies and doing an intimidation check. Weirdly fun to play with, even if a little immersion breaking. That sounds pretty fun for a short while. 17-year-old male player, Star Druid, mostly a blaster build. I don't like the title of the story and the ages involved in this. This is already getting a little bit creepy and the story hasn't even started yet. We ended up having an excellent first session. It went off without a hitch. We killed 2 bosses, we reached level 3, and we wound up eating a goblin's cooked entrails. Nice. The rogue should probably have just played a bard because he tried to sleep around to 50-50 success, and it was hilarious whenever he failed. I was particularly enjoying spending time with the wizard. She and I had excellent synergy both in our playstyles and our abilities. I was loving the campaign, and I told that to the DM at the end of the session. He asked me what I thought of the wizard, and I said I respected her. "She's a cutie, huh?" he asked me. Oh no. I was confused by this question, but I said yes. Looking back, I should have seen this as a red flag, but I was 16 and I'm autistic. In our next session, we had a lot of fun again and reached level 5. These are some pretty quick levels. But there was something that happened several times. The wizard got put in 3 positions in 3 separate combats. In the first, she got restrained by vines used by the enemy druid. In the second, she was chained up. In the third, she was grappled, bitten, and open hand choked by an enemy wrestler type. Okay. She appeared visibly uncomfortable about this. I was uncomfortable with it too. After the session, she texted me about leaving the campaign. She'd apparently talked to the DM about his behaviour and he'd blown it off. I told her it was totally cool if she leaves and that I also found it uncomfortable. I later found out she'd been trying to implicitly ask me to help her talk to the DM that she wanted to leave because she was anxious about confrontation. But my autistic ass didn't see that. We ended up showing up to the next session a week later. After a long combat heavy beginning to the session, we found ourselves in a town separated. The wizard went across the street to get something from the store late at night. She got jumped by guards and the entire party made perception checks to hear her when she cried out. I heard her and rushed to save her. And I found her tied up by the guards, who then offered me, a famous hero of the town guards, her body. Oh indeed. I could tell that she was IRL freaking out. She had a look of anxiety on her face. I could see the DM with this odd smile on his face. I must have rolled a nat 20 on my IRL insight check because I realised this was the moment I needed to make an excuse to hightail the frick out of there. I killed the guards, not hard for an optimised 5th level fighter to handle 5 town guards when you win initiative. Then coup de grace her and then myself on the character justification that my character was set off by traumatic nature of what had just transpired. By the DM's house rule, that meant we were both banned, that avoided any confrontation, and Wizard and I walked to my place and hung out for a few hours. She thanked me for my help, telling me I'd done the right thing. The DM called me a few days later, asking why I'd done that. I told him with much more cursing that this behaviour had been highly inappropriate. He told me that he'd been trying to set the 2 of us up, that she and I were dom and sub, and that we should be dating. I told him that life doesn't work that way, that consent is important both in setting up friends and especially in BDSM. She and I ended up getting the weirdest kind of solidarity after this bizarre shared experience. We were friends for a long time and played a few more D&D games together, without that DM of course. I ended up developing a crush on her and I never voiced it because it seemed like it would be so goddamn awkward after that campaign from the past. That's really sad. Guys, if you want to set up your friends, here's a tip. Consent is as important in romance as it is in... Always keep that in mind. I would like to thank D&D Horror Stories YouTubers Crit Crab, Dan the Drake, and Sir Notes for making me comfortable sharing this story. Oh wow. Yeah, this definitely seems like a very weird way to set people up, a very unconsensual way, and consent is definitely important. Everyone in this party seems pretty young, so you know, mistakes happen. Hopefully the DM learns from their mistake and improves on it. But yeah, it's really sad that you didn't get to voice your feelings because of that. Story 3, just titled Neckbeard DM. My husband, Jay, and I are planning a trip later this month for my 30th birthday, and I wanted to do something fun, but cheap on the day off. We've lived in our current city for a short time, so I decided we should try a board game cafe and try Adventurers League. It was a cheap, fun way to spend my birthday. The DM in Discord told us level 8, so I rolled up a paladin, my husband a bard. The DM told us nothing about the campaign, no setting, no gear to expect, no class requests, nothing. I told them we have experience in normal campaigns, neither of us had done Adventure League before. We got there and the DM was a guy who had probably just turned 21. He was drinking but looked super young. The other player looked to be about 19 or 20. We were setting up when the first red flag happened. I was talking about this bard and how he wanted to run a campaign of all bards with different schools of magic. A sort of travelling band. The DM responded with, "Oh, so you want an orgy? What?" I tried to laugh off with, "I guess it depends if we're going on stage or not." No, it's an orgy. I'm not dumb, we all know the horny bard D&D trope. But it'd been about 5 minutes since we met the guy. The other player was really quiet and hard to hear, but he and the DM were clearly friends, and all he really said about his character was that he was a moon goddess worshipping cleric that used to be addicted to cocaine. Another, okay moment. So we get going, and Jay went to cast his first spell, and before he even got a chance to roll, DM said it missed. He didn't even ask what Jay's spell DC was, he just said that it missed and moved on with the other player, his friend. My turns were especially weird, as my paladin always seemed to be out of reach of enemies, or missed on hits, no matter how high I rolled. DM also said that since Adventure League characters are supposed to switch between adventures, it gave him free reign to mess with us. My character kept getting knocked out or falling over. At one point he said I slipped down a hill, so I told him that since my shield was out, I'd like to use it as sled to catch myself. I whiffed the roll, which is fine. What was weird is when my character got up and took the damage. He proceeded to make me roll to pick up my shield 4 different times, saying that I kept dropping it on my feet and taking damage while giggling. It was funny at first, but this kind of thing kept happening over and over again, to me in particular. So we were playing, and it's pretty loud in the cafe. The DM was at the head of the table, with myself on his right and the other players across from me on his left. Jay was next to me, furthest from the DM, and he has bad hearing. So I went to go grab our order during the other player's turn. I told him to switch seats with me. Unfortunately, this gave the DM a better view of my chest, which he proceeded to stare at whenever it was my turn. Thus began the night of weird misogyny. Oh no. I told the DM I had just rolled up the paladin this afternoon, and it was my first time playing as one. He responded with, "Oh, so you've never played D&D before?" I had literally just told him that both my husband and I had been playing D&D for years. Jay is both player and DM, we just never done Adventure League before. I wasn't used to the character yet and was still learning my spells. He took my sheet and said I rolled the character's HP wrong because I didn't use the Adventure League character guide. I didn't know there was one, so both Jay and I rolled up normal characters from the player's handbook. Something that would have been nice to know when I mentioned it was our first time playing Adventures League on Discord earlier. He got annoyed with me for doing it wrong, but my husband was fine. Weird that. The cherry on top of the night was when we were done and packing up. This kid had the actual balls to tell us for a ride home. Both Jay and I are way too nice for our own good, so we gave him a ride. The entire time he was in the backseat asking when he would see us again because the league needed more players and they never seemed to get new ones. Needless to say, but when we dropped him off and drove away, we both burst out laughing. Like my dude, the call was coming from inside the house. Yeah, based on this story, there's definitely some favoritism going on towards certain genders and some weirdness going towards others. It's a shame that their first... I mean, I've never played Adventure League, but it's a shame that their first Adventure League was so strange and not fun. I imagine being messed with all game is not a good way to be introduced. Story 4. Hello everyone, I'm posting here for the first time, inspired by YouTube narrators like Doge and Crow, the Drake, the Rat, the Crab, and probably some boring old humans too. Anyone who wants to read the story can do so, but be warned, it's a long one. I was in a play-by post. Forum-based D&D game in which we were students of a magical academy inspired by Magic the Gathering. At this point, most of you are probably saying, "Ah, you mean Strixhaven." Except this was homebrew, 3.5 edition, and happened in the late 2000s. This was before Critical Role or Stranger Things brought D&D into the mainstream. So the player base was smaller and nerdier, and the quality of storytelling tended to be low on average, though of course you still find excellent DMing and role-playing in some games. This wasn't one of those games. The setting was a magical high school, not college, and PCs ran the game of high school fanfiction stock characters. There was a ridiculously edgy guy who chewed human finger bones, which he kept in a little bag like peanuts, even though they cut the inside of his mouth to ribbons and caused blood to dribble down his chin. There was a shy, wallflower girl looking for any male with a pulse to attach to and fawn over. It turned out to be the edgy guy. There was a beautiful and mysterious Mary Sue, who was the most interesting and misunderstood girl in the school, and involved herself in everyone's business so she could always be the centre of attention and was oh so unfairly persecuted when anyone didn't want to entertain her. There was even ordinary people who just wanted to play a D&D Hogwarts student and didn't do anything obnoxious enough for me to remember them 15 years later. And then there was the main character of this story. Interestingly, I recognised his username before the game started. He was a regular and infamous poster on the RPG discussion board of another website I frequented, where he would include a screenshot of Naruto Shikamaru in every post, his makeshift avatar on a board that didn't conventionally support them, along with bargain basement, Ayn Rand, objectivist takes, or my favourite, conversations with his girlfriend, quote unquote, in which he replied to his own posts, switching back and forth between Shikamaru and Ino. I didn't watch Naruto, so I'm probably missing some subtleties in his characterization, but I understand Shikamaru was some sort of genius, but too lazy to do anything with it. So he seemed like an apt avatar for someone who has accomplished nothing in his life, but wants an excuse to believe that the smartest person in the room anyway. I won't use his real username, so I'll call him Tim Income instead. If you know, you know. I don't know. Here is where I want to make clear I don't want, expect, or deserve sympathy for what happened to my character in this story. The DM was taking all corners, so when I saw Tim's name in the application thread, I knew only drama would come of it. The thing is, I already knew this game was going to be a hot mess due to its teenaged fanfic nature, but I played anyway because 1, I wanted a laid-back game, and 2, I thought it would be an entertaining disaster. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I did predict it would be a clusterfuck, and I got what I wanted. For that reason, I don't feel bad for what you're about to read. I played a 14-year-old girl whose backstory and personality is not relevant to this story. Tim Income played a 15-year-old shonen anime character with 3 shonen anime traits, if the shonen anime were written by an idiot. First, he had a non-stop internal monologue commenting on how annoying and dumb everyone else was. Second, he was presented as an underpowered underdog, but cunning and devious enough to make up for it, even though Tim Income himself was as subtle and intelligent as a firecracker and a dog turd. Amazing. And third, he was a complete horn dog whose first priority was to get laid as soon as possible and set his sights on literally every girl in class. Now, this game moved fast. Players were firing posts out like machine guns. At the time, I was in university and could post multiple times a day. But even so, the introductory game thread was several pages deep before I could even introduce my character, which I did by making her the butt of some slapstick. I suspect that this expression of humility, compared to the other PCs that took themselves more seriously, is what drew Tim Income to my character in particular. Since predators are always good at picking out the most vulnerable. When the homeroom teacher gave the students free time to socialise, the thread immediately descended into chaos as PCs began ping-ponging off each other. Tim Income immediately approached my character, who was still sitting at her desk, since I hadn't had time to post, and draped his arms around her, introducing himself with an emoji of waggling eyebrows. An NPC took offense to this and told him off, so he cast a spell to turn invisible, swept some papers off his desk that looked like he ran up from the room, but actually cuddled up to my character and whispered in her ear, "Don't worry, babe. I'd never leave you." Creepy. At this point, my character had not even acknowledged his existence. Now, it would be a few hours before I could reply. In that time, other people posted and Tim Income posted in reply, accompanying his observations of their behaviour with descriptions of how he was flirting with my unresponsive character, such as asking her out for dinner, tickling her, blowing in her ear, and all the other standard things one does with people they've just met, of course. When I could finally post, I described my visibly flustered character getting up from her desk and burying herself in the crowd too thick for him to follow, eventually beelining towards a paladin. Around this point, Tim Income's invisibility was dispelled, and he tickled my character's chin, who has still not said a single word to him, and told her he'd wait for her outside, then stormed out the room. This put him in a separate thread, where one of the teachers stopped him and told him to smarten up and stop being a jackass, while my character asked the paladin to escort her to her next class because she felt scared. I wouldn't have to wait until next class, however, because Tim Income ended his talk with the teacher, waited for him to leave, and then cast Disguise Self to take the teacher's appearance before re-entering the classroom and beckoning my character to follow him. My character assumed she was being disciplined for something and followed him out of the class, where he led her to a secluded corner, grabbed the collar and forced a kiss on her, transforming back into his character with a Did you miss me? Dude, you haven't even spoken yet. I don't know if he thought this was a romantic gesture or a slapstick moment, but he didn't expect my character's response, which was to start hysterically screaming and trying to get away from him. This never happened in his Japanese animes. Perplexed, he tried to calm her down by stroking her hair and other flirtatious gestures, then lost his nerve and pulled out a scroll, wondering why everyone in the school was crazy but him. The Marisu did not miss her opportunity to burst out of the classroom and zero in on their isolated corner to attack him, but he used a scroll of Gias to make her think she was his girlfriend, which wasn't how Gias worked, but no one caught that and it was soon dispelled anyway. Now, Tim Income was not actually booted from the game for this. It was the late 2000s, we were less enlightened at the time, where consent and assault were not taken seriously as today. However, while his character was allowed to continue attending the school, the faculty put a block on his spellcasting and he rage quit the game anyway. Yes! He was later banned from the forum altogether for posting something in a political discussion thread that was later deleted. That wasn't the end of Tim Income, however. The game hemorrhaged players, and as play-by-post games do, and eventually went recruiting for replacements. One of the applicants was a new account with an extremely familiar style of writing and humour, and whose character submission included a flaw. Flaws were a variant rule of 3.5 that allowed you to pick up a mechanical weakness, such as halving your base speed or gaining a fewer hit points per level in exchange for a feat. You get more feats in 3.5 than 5e, and they tended to be weaker, but flaws were still almost solely the providence of min-maxers. Anyway, this character's flaw was located on a D&D homebrew wiki and named Medusa's Eye. It cursed your character so that anyone who looked at your character's cursed eye at any time had to make a DC 40 saving throw or be permanently petrified. That sounds insane. If you've been keeping track, this means they wanted to have a at-will, no-action DC 40 save or die power, and they wanted an extra feat for their trouble. For some reason, they weren't accepted to the game. I wonder why. That sounds like a level 20 spell in D&D 5e. TLDR, PC wants a girlfriend, so he forces physical affection on another player and is flabbergasted by their lack of gratitude. You know, this makes me appreciate some of the lengths that we've come in society, because I feel like in a lot of scenarios now, this sort of thing would be called out, removed, any sort of, not okayness. Late 2000s, there were still a lot of things going around that were incredibly offensive now, but you got away with. So this sort of thing makes me appreciate we've not come all the way, but how far we've come. And this sort of thing hopefully gets called out more often, and hopefully people have to experience it less. Story 5. DM just wants PCs to always be slaves. Listen, if you have a great idea and want to run with it, and have ideas on how PCs that are slaves become something more, if, however, every single game you create and run involves all PCs being slaves, then you might need to think about why. My old DM created a homebrewed world. It was pretty cool sounding. So my husband and I joined up as we were nearing the end of a COS campaign. I'd come up with a really fun PC idea and run it by the DM. He told me it wouldn't be possible as we would all be slaves to start with. Okay, so how are we going to do any kind of adventuring? He said we would remain slaves throughout, but we would be selected to go on a quest that will fail. We would all die quickly because as slaves, we wouldn't survive long out on our own. Weird. Needless to say, that campaign fell apart quickly. Then he wants us to join a one-shot he is writing where we, once again, all be slaves. Forced into gladiatorial combat, we would also start with no items whatsoever except tattered common clothes. Yeah, that sounds terrible. We declined. This one didn't even happen. Now he wants to revisit the world he created many years in the future where we would all be, you guessed it, slaves. We will not be participating in this one or any other he sets up. Why is he so obsessed with forcing PCs to be slaves? It's so gross. Yeah, this one's definitely weird. Maybe he just likes the idea of a campaign where you're really weak and you're really unfit for survival and you try your best to get as far as possible, like a really grueling campaign. But the problem is you have to have PCs that are willing to do that. And this DM needs to ask the PCs what they're expecting before creating such a dynamic. I'm sure if he found someone or some players that wanted to do a grueling campaign, it could be really fun to see how far you get. But every single campaign and without talking beforehand is definitely weird and going to drive players away, as it did. Anyway guys, that's all for my first episode of D&D Horror Stories. I hope you enjoy. I might do a few more, we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping to grow this channel in various ways. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.